Welcome to our presentation on community development in the west end of Hyannis. We're talking about the proposed development on the Twin Brooks golf course in Hyannis. My name is Janet Milkman and I'm the director of the Barnstable Land Trust. And here with me today are members of our consultant team, and I'll let them introduce themselves.
I'm Matthew Utile. I'm the principal at Utile Inc. We are a Boston-based planning and architecture firm.
And I'm Andrea Baena, an architectural and urban designer at Utile.
And another member of the team who's not with us today is Kate Kennan, partner with Offshoots, a landscape architecture firm in Boston. Our agenda today for this presentation, which will last about a half an hour or a little less, is to introduce this proposed development with you and to talk about how we are working with the community and engaging the community to get input around what is the best development on this site. And we'll talk a little bit about why it's really important for us to be having this conversation, what is proposed on the site and what the process is in terms of the regulatory environment at the Cape Cod Commission and the town of Barnstable, and how the public can engage in this process. And then talk about some guiding questions and issues to think about when we are trying to determine what is most appropriate for this site, whether it's housing, whether it's open space, what kinds of both of those things should go on this site. And this will all lead into a conversation about a survey that we are conducting in order to get your opinion on what you think should be done here, or how the developer might change what he is proposing a bit. And then we'll talk about next steps in the process, how you can fill out the survey, how you can share the survey with friends and neighbors who also might be impacted by this project. And then we'll really look forward to hearing from you online, by phone, however is most convenient for you. So let's start with the proposed development. Lennar Multifamily Communities, which is a very large national development company. Their website says they are one of the largest home builders in the nation. They're proposing to develop 40 acres, which is now a golf course, into an apartment complex that would have 312 units of rental housing, about 468 parking spaces on a site that is now one of the largest open spaces in the village of Hyannis in the town of Barnstable. And because this is such a large development, one of the largest new developments on Cape, let alone in Hyannis, and because it is a very large parcel of open space in an area that is pretty underserved for public open space, Barnstable Land Trust is exploring ways to have a conversation about whether this is the best use of this site. Is there a way to both protect open space and natural resources and provide very much needed housing, as well as supporting economic development that's so vital to Cape Cod's downtown, which is Hyannis. And in this process, there are a number of opportunities for the public, neighbors and other residents of Hyannis and Centerville, and those who will be impacted by this project, to provide input. And what we are trying to do is to have a conversation and coordinate a response for the Cape Cod Commission and the town of Barnstable, so that they can understand what the vision of the community is for this site. And the process for this effort is, first of all, to do some mapping and site analysis, which our consultants at Utile have already done, put together the structure for this conversation. Step 2, where we are right now, is a series of engagement meetings and a survey with this recording as part of it. We are meeting with local groups. We will meet with your group if you would like. We're really looking to engage with anyone who's interested in having a conversation about what should go on this site. And we'll be doing that for another few weeks, which will take us into mid to late November. And at that point, all of the input that you give us will be considered and turned into alternative concept designs for the site by our consultant. And then we'll come back to you with a few choices, and you'll be able to say which one you think best meets your ideas and ideal vision for this project. And then again, the consultant will take that input and put together a final consensus plan, which we will share with the regulatory bodies, in this case, the Cape Cod Commission, the town, and the decision makers there. And that will be a very structured way to get input from you.
The proposed development is very significant, not only because it occupies a very important large swath of open space in the west end of Hyannis, but because it really is perhaps one of the largest residential development proposals on the Cape. The current proposal consists of 312 apartments in several different buildings. What you're seeing at the right here is a rendering that was provided by the developer of the scale and style of those buildings. Monthly rents are anticipated to range from between $1,500 and, let's say, $2,700 or $2,800 a month. It's important to note that the U.S. Census data has indicated that median gross rents in Barnstable are about half of that, at about $1,300. 10% of the proposed units would be affordable. That's about 31 apartments that would have a deed restriction or some other mechanism to ensure that the rents for those apartments would be kept at an affordable rate. The developer is proposing a variety of different unit types, including studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms, and again, in 13 buildings located around the site. The project is in the beginning stages of its approval process. Because of its size and significance, it will require approvals from the Cape Cod Commission, which is an ongoing process. In addition, once achieving approvals from the Cape Cod Commission, the project would need to establish a developer's agreement also with the town, and to undergo review by various regulatory bodies in the town, perhaps including the Planning Commission or others. There are several issues that will certainly come up during this process, some of which have to do with environmental impacts, such as stormwater runoff that may be associated with the parking areas that you're seeing here on the right-hand image. Other issues that may come up will certainly include a discussion about traffic. The project, as it has submitted, is estimated to increase the daily trips from this site from about 550 to roughly 1,700 trips a day. It is critical to address housing. It's a consistently identified need on the Cape generally, and particularly in Hyannis. But there is also a need to conserve open space in the fragile ecological environment of the Cape. Housing needs are acutely felt by everyone. According to a recent report, 81% of homeowners in Hyannis are what's called cost burdened, which means that they have to spend more than 30% of their income to maintain their mortgages or rent. There is a problem associated with attracting and retaining workers and employees who can afford to live in this town year round. So while the housing needs are certainly well known, so are the needs of the environment and the needs for conservation. The significance of this site is that it is proximate to several bodies of sensitive water. And there is a continuing issue on the Cape with pollution associated with fertilizers, excessive stormwater, which are some of the contributing factors to some things that all residents notice, such as odors or shellfish closures. What's important to understand from the sort of conservation aspect is that the Twin Brook site is not just a standalone site. It actually borders a very important set of natural systems. Freshwater drains from Aunt Betty's Pond through Stewart's Creek. Fawcett's Pond actually drains underwater towards Joshua's Brook, which you see on the left-hand side of this image, also feeds into Stewart's Creek. Both of these borders create wetlands, which are on both sides of the project and downstream as well. So it's important when we think about the future of this site to think about it not just as a standalone piece of green turf, but a very important asset in a much larger connected ecosystem within this region.
So now we're going to talk a little bit more about what the proposed development includes and what are the current site conditions. So currently the site is used as a golf course, a private recreational open space. As Matthew was mentioning, it is bordered by Stewart's Creek and Joshua's Brook on east and west, and by the Hyannis Resort and Convention Center on the north. It is worthy to note that development here would have access to the Stewart system. The current proposal may alter the balance of the developed area and the surrounding natural resources. In fact, the current proposal would increase the amount of impervious surfaces in this 40-acre property from 0.1 to approximately 8.7 acres. And as you can see in this image, even though the current development proposal maintains a distance from the fragile wetlands, the plan does fall slightly within the 500-year floodplain. Much of the tree canopy that currently exists within the golf course outside of the wetlands would be cleared to make room for buildings and parking proposed in this plan. So now we're going to talk about some guiding questions and issues that we would like to discuss with all of you and to hear more from you in future meetings or through the survey. We really want to build together a vision that balances the needs for more housing and for development with the environmental needs and the conservation of the natural systems. So to guide this conversation, we're going to talk about first how the site relates to the neighborhoods around the site and to downtown. And then we're going to talk about the relationship between the site and the natural systems. The site is located at the edge of the growth incentive zone. As you can see in this diagram, it is not directly in the growth incentive zone, but it's very close to it. It is bordered by two important freshwater brooks. There are potential connections between the site and the adjacent residential neighborhoods of C Street on the east and neighborhoods on the west. In the west end of Hyannis, there's not a lot of usable open space other than the cemetery and the beaches. Most of the parks in Hyannis are concentrated on the east end. So there is definitely a potential to develop new usable open space that is connected to the neighborhoods in this west side of Hyannis. It is also important to note that this site is not the only place where development could take place. In fact, as you can see here, there's a few sites around the West End Rotary, which might be developed into multifamily residential projects. These new developments might also have an impact on the already problematic traffic in the West End Rotary. Also, other places in Hyannis where development could take place. In fact, if we zoom out, we can see there are a few planned housing developments in underutilized properties in downtown Hyannis. And there's a potential to develop underutilized parking areas within the growth incentive zone for new housing. So we want to hear from you about what you think the development in this site could look like. Here are some choices that would help us develop some alternative visions for the site. Do you imagine developing housing in the site, be it affordable or market rate housing, or maybe a combination of both, or other land use options such as hotel, office, event space, mixed use development, which might include residential and other types of land use, or no development? No one knows the character of a town better than the local community. This is why we're reaching out to you to help us build a vision that will blend into the context. So if housing were to be developed in this site, we would like to get your thoughts on what the appropriate scale and type of buildings we should develop. Here are some options across a spectrum of scale, which ranges from smaller single-family detached units all the way to small-scale multifamily buildings like the walk-up. Which options do you think would be a good fit for the Twin Brooks site? This is one of the questions that will be included in the survey, and we would love to hear more about it, more about your opinions. Now we're going to talk about how the site relates to the surrounding natural systems. So as Matthew had explained before, the site is part of a larger ecological and tidal system, which includes Joshua's Brook and Stewart's Creek, with subsurface water connections all the way from Fawcett's Pond and on Betty's Pond to the Lewis Bay. There is potential to integrate in the site green infrastructure that could help manage water in the case of flood events. This is especially important because the site is vulnerable to hurricane surge inundation categories 1 through 4, which includes storm-related flooding caused both by tidal surges from the harbor as well as rainwater accumulation that comes from inland water sources. In this site, we find a great variety of ecological conditions which come together. A large part of the site is covered by turf grass. We also find a large part covered with tree canopies and wetlands, mostly concentrated on the borders. We would like to get your ideas on how do you think we could connect the site both with the surrounding natural systems and the C Street and Greenwood Street neighborhoods to the east and west of the site. Here are some options, some ideas of how these connections could happen. Could we maybe provide pedestrian access from the neighborhoods into the site, going over the wetlands? Could we create some usable neighborhood open space within the site that benefits people living in the area? Could we establish trails that run along the brooks? Or could we be even more ambitious and think about creating a public path that connects the site, Stewart's Creek, and the beach, going through C Street to create some kind of loop? Or should we focus on protecting neighborhoods from any noise or activity? And if we do create or enhance the open space, what types of activities do you envision happening in these spaces? Do you envision active recreation, such as playgrounds or sports facilities? Do you envision places for events, picnics, or barbecues, community gardens, an outdoor learning center for kids to learn about all the natural resources we have in the area, or some trails either running along the path or elevated paths crossing the wetlands? And if you have any other ideas that are not listed here, we would love to hear about them. What kind of activities and what do you envision in this new open space? Lastly, we would like to get a sense of what the overall priorities are for the reuse of this site. We would like to know, out of these options, which ones do you think are most important? Do you think we should focus mostly on creating open green space that is accessible to the residents in the area? Should we focus on mitigating impacts of climate change or protecting wildlife habitat? Should developing housing be a priority, either market-priced housing or affordable housing? Should we provide access to the site's natural resources, or should we contribute to the economic growth of Hyannis? And can you think of any other important opportunities or challenges that haven't been mentioned so far that you think are important when thinking about a vision for this site? We invite you all to participate in the complete survey, which includes some of the questions we've seen with additional questions. You can find the survey in the Barnstable Land Trust Twin Brooks webpage, or you can access it through the QR code that you find on the screen right now. Your input is very important in building a vision that is based on the community's most pressing needs and respecting the existing natural context and the built character. I'll pass it on to you, Jen.
Oh, thank you. So the online survey questions are a little more specific than what you've seen here. We're asking for both your general comments on the best use of the site, and again, we're open to other creative suggestions. For example, we'll ask you what you think the Resort and Conference Center, which is actually part of the same ownership, but not part of the proposed development, how might that be integrated into a vision for this site? We'll ask you specifically what your priorities are in terms of ecological and resiliency strategies. That is, should we be using this big 40-acre green space to help protect water quality? Should we be using a piece of it for housing, a piece of it for infrastructure to help deal with stormwater and water nutrient loading issues? What are the best opportunities that this site provides? And if you want to see a public park, for example, what would you want opportunities for on that site? A community garden, a bike path, etc. How do you envision the relationship between the site and the neighborhoods? What should the public access be? And if you think the most important thing is to have housing as the developer proposed, should it be at that scale? Should it be that kind of housing? And what should the price points be? What is most needed on that site? So in the end, we're looking for your input on what the developer proposed and how that might be altered to make for a healthier community development on the west end of Hyannis. And again, the survey is online, as Andrea said. We would look for your input on that, and we would also look for you to share with us any other thoughts that you have, and that could be through the survey or through email. All that information is in the last slide. You can ask us to present at a meeting for your neighborhood group or congregation, however you gather at your kitchen table. We're really happy to talk with you further about these really important community issues. And the process, as we said, will be going on. The engagement process at this phase will be going on for another few weeks through mid-November, mid to late November. So we do have a few more weeks to get our message out. We'd ask for you to help us do that by sharing our recording, sharing our survey with your friends and neighbors who will be impacted by this development and who would like to have input into the conversation and the approval process. So once this phase is complete, again, we'll take all of your input and put together some alternatives, share them with you again. We'll be able to share them with you only if we have a way of getting a hold of you. So if you fill out the survey, we'll be asking for your email address. And then you'll be able to join us at an event to choose the winning vision for this proposed site, and also to share that with the decision makers on this project. So again, here's the information for you to learn more about the project, to share it, to take the survey, to be in touch with us. And we thank you for your attention, and we really hope to hear from you in the next few weeks about this very important project.